how could you spot a liar in a minute? Is there like just like some telltale signs that someone can just tell right away?
The general idea is like 3 hot spots. You're looking for 3 clues because lie detection is really, really hard, as it turns out. So there are all sorts of, if somebody's using a qualifier, the one I like, the guy who told me he was a mostly good guy wanted to date me.
Mostly
Like,
good guy.
ooh,
Yeah.
turned out, yeah, he was married. I was
Oh,
like, that was
not
like
so
a red
great.
flag. Going up, like raising your voice as a question, that's one of the things I look for. Nodding, and this is not universal, but it is practically universal in North America, US, Canada, Mexico. When Hillary Clinton says, I knew my husband was a good man, and she's, she should be doing this. And instead she goes, and my husband's a good man.
I've been very excited to talk to you, Annie, for a lot of hosts of reasons. I'm just going to tell the audience, because we're going to go right into it. Annie's is, I guess, AKA the Human Lie Detector. That's basically I guess that's what you're known for. That's what you're known as, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh God, I'm scared. By the way, so I want to just give a little brief. So Annie's known. Her book is called Diary of a Human Lie Detector: Facial Expressions in Love, Lust, and Lies. And you basically know thousands of facial expressions, and you can read thousands of different facial expressions to tell if somebody is lying to you, if they like you, if they're a narcissist, if they're a psychopath. I mean, I'm actually kind of nervous interviewing you because you're going to be watching my face, and I'm now going to be like, oh, I shouldn't do this. I should sit like that. Does that ever happen? Do people get scared to talk to you?
Oh, all the time. And so just to clarify, like I can numerically code, or anybody who is trained in facial action coding systems can take the 10,000 different muscle combinations. And it's not thousands of facial expressions, but it is a lot of muscle combinations, and it's a lot of facial expressions. And yes, people get really nervous, but almost nobody gets as nervous as men who have some kind of shame in their lives. They get really, really wound up.
Really? Not women
Yes.
women don't get nervous if they
Women
have
get a
shame?
little flustered, but I think women innately, and not all of us, because we do, thank goodness, have different wiring in our brains. Every individual is, slightly different. But I think we women are used to some other people around us being able to read us really well. I mean, a lot of us
Mm.
have good friends and family members that have kind of been able to read us, or even hear that kind of hitch in our voice or tightness in our vocal cords. And they'll kind of turn around quickly and say, well, what's wrong? When what do you mean what's wrong? I didn't say anything. No, I can hear it, or I can feel it, or I can sense it. I can see it on you. So I think we're just used to reading others or focusing on those skills, and we're used to being read more often, or sometimes more hyper aware of it.
Or I think also probably women wear their emotions on their sleeves probably more, so it's more obvious.
Well, we're certainly, socialized for it to be okay to show emotion. It's expected from an earlier age. I mean, I had to catch myself a couple of times with my son. I would get I was more stern with him when he was crying once he got to a certain age than I was with my daughters, and I had to catch myself because I didn't want him not to show his emotion,
Right.
but it was so hardwired into me to kind of be like, "Why are you whining?"
Yeah, it's so true. I have a boy and a girl, and I definitely understand the difference between that. Like you treat the boy and the girl differently based on what's already kind of programmed and conditioned to how you
Yes,
think they
yeah,
should behave, right?
right.
I totally feel that I do that as well. Is there like a big difference because you don't read body language, you read facial expressions. Which
Right.
is more telling and which one is harder to, I guess, deceive?
Okay, so I do read body language, I just don't teach it very often. So I
Okay.
spent I spent 25 years of my life living abroad, and I studied 8 languages through immersion. So I've spent, in addition to doing this facial action coding certification, I have spent years and years of my life not understanding what people are saying. So that's how I
Oh,
got
wow.
so good at reading body language, facial expressions, tone of voice, choice of words. That's what made me this sort of human lie detector, combined with the science of facial expressions. But the question is excellent. So I usually define it in the simplest terms that body language varies from person to person. Even two siblings within the same family can have wildly different body language. Crossing your arms, for example, may mean that you're belligerent or you're angry or you're defensive. Certainly, if it comes into the context of having an argument, or if you see a little kid go, and cross their arms. But it can also mean that you're Finnish or you're German or that's how you
Mm.
self-soothe, or you're cold, or you're just a little uncomfortable thinking about something else. The facial expressions, the piece that I love and the reason that I've gotten so into teaching facial expressions is that they are biological responses. They are
Mm.
they are the same. The micro expressions are the same regardless of culture, ethnicity, age, gender, socialization, no matter who raised us. Even people who are born blind make the same facial expressions, the same basic facial expressions. There are some cultural expressions, but I don't teach those. I don't focus on those. So the facial expression says exactly what someone is feeling in the exact moment they're feeling it. The micro expression does, because the micro expression precedes the thought process and is involuntary. So unless I change my thoughts, I can't stop myself, even me, from making the micro expressions. So I have 3 grown children, and our
Wow.
dinner table is a mess.
Yeah. I can imagine. Wait, so this is very interesting. You said a few things that I want to talk about. Number one, so body language could be also not just dependent on what's dependent person to person, but also culturally. Like what you do in one
Sure.
culture could be very distinctly different how you do your body language
Yeah.
is in another culture.
Yeah.
But what you said was interesting that microfacial expressions,
Mhm.
it doesn't matter what culture, who, what, age, ethnicity, doesn't matter. It's always the same.
Because it's biologically hardwired into us. So I'll give you an example that when
Yeah.
human beings are afraid, we do this. We pull our upper eyelids back, and that's so that we can widen our field of vision so we can gauge, like, how do I get out of this situation? Where can I escape? I mean, it's a physiological response. And
Right.
so you see the tendons of my neck jump,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that's because fear opens our mouths. If you look at pictures of people in haunted houses, you know how sometimes you go through those haunted houses,
Yeah.
or you're doing like a Disney World, or they snap the picture at the moment where your mouth, like,
Yeah.
and if you look at those pictures, everybody across ethnicities, ages, genders, like everybody makes the same exact facial expression when they're absolutely terrified. And we open our mouths. That's the only expression that really rectangularizes the entire mouth. And that's so we can scream bloody murder, so we can, get help. So there's a physiological reason that there's a change in blood flow and muscle movement for each facial expression. And so the micro expression of fear is just, see how that does the neck tendon? And it's just
Yeah.
this pull of, like, it's just like that little itching to come out. And it can also be this pull back. Now, there are other facial expressions that widen our eye aperture, like excitement, but we're opening the lower lid and the upper lid, sorry, and it gives you a different vibe. So me going, oh, just a little bit for a hot second, that's very different than this, which communicates danger,
So
danger,
but
danger.
danger. So you're saying that our facial expressions actually happen before our brain even processes it.
The muscle movement precedes the moment of cognition.
That is so interesting.
I
So
think
it's
so too.
right. So you can't really fake your
Yes.
facial expression, right? And
You can fake the macros. Like, I can pretend to be happy, or I can, like, do a big expression, but the tiny flicker of micro expression leaks out of us before we can stop it. It's like when, up until the age of about 2, we make these big facial expressions, and we human beings scan the entire face. And once our parents starts really socializing us as human beings, and they start saying, "Look me in the eyes when you speak to me," we start forgetting that sort of innate human species thing where we looked all over the face to gauge the expression and the emotion. It's like that was how we read people when we didn't have any access to words or socialization. It's hardwired into us. And so people who maintain their hypervigilance, in other words, grow up in abusive situations or war zones, they tend to be really, really good at reading facial expressions because they don't lose that ability. So it's almost like it's there before we're verbal and we lose it. It's almost like I think of it as baby language, or that it's our universal nonverbal language. And when people get in romantic situations and they're going to kiss somebody for the first time, that's when they start tracking again, because they sort of revert into that primitive brain. I want to know if you're going to reject me. So I start like tracking, looking all over the face. Is there any clue? And people we're not even aware we're doing it.
I love this. So what's the difference between a macro expression and a micro expression?
Okay. The macro expression is the full expression. It's the expression we would kind of make if we weren't socialized. So the macro expression of disgust, which I call the no face, is this. It's that face of like, you come with the peas or the mushed up, like gross food that you have to eat. You see, I already do that, like innately thinking about the gross. It shuts off our nasal passages. So it 3 main pieces: wrinkles the skin next to our nose, deepens our nasolabial furrow. I sometimes call this the nostril shadow because I find that's easier for people to remember. And it pulls up our upper lips. Right? It's that ew, and it shuts off our nasal passages, our sense of smell, up to about 80%. That's the macro. But we learn, don't make that face at grandma, or like don't make that face at your sister. It's rude to be like,
Mm.
I don't like you, or I don't want to eat this. The micro expression is the piece. So that's the macro. I see it as the whole puzzle. And for each expression, when I'm teaching, I teach you what the whole puzzle looks like. So if you just get 1 or 2 puzzle pieces from that specific puzzle, you recognize it. So remember, I talked about wrinkling next to the nose and the deepening of the nasolabial furrow. Disgust is just this. But because it happens so fast, up to about
Mm.
a 25th of a second, just that little flicker, you almost have to prepare your gaze and look at this part of the face or you'll miss it. So if I'm asking
You know,
you if you want to eat Italian food tonight, I might dip my gaze and just see if I get a little no.
what, so this is okay. So, by the way, guys, you got to watch the video on YouTube because you have to see exactly what Annie is doing. But she was just like kind of pulsing like that. What do you call that thing? The
No,
nasal,
I call it the
what,
nostril shadow because it's
the
the
nostril
shadow. It's like
shadow.
where people tend to get some fillers in there because they think it makes them look a little old, but it's this wrinkle that is just right next to the nostrils. Usually when I make them micro myself, unless I'm really upset by something, then both sides jump. But usually it's just my left side, and everybody's got a side that they favor. And it's almost like, when you get that tick on your eye sometimes when you're really tired or stressed
Yes,
and your eye,
yes.
like right underneath your
Ticks.
eye, just jumps. That's what it feels like. And people often don't notice it when it's next to the nose. But it's just that little jump. And I sometimes call it like the bad bunny rabbit twitch.
So that's a good name for it too. So basically, macro expressions are more the obvious ones, right? Like you're
Yes.
disgusted, you're happy, whatever.
Yes.
But the
Yeah.
micro are like the very subtleties that you can actually really tell how someone is truly thinking or
In the
feeling
exact moment
in that exact
that they're
Okay,
feeling.
so let's go over some stuff here. So what are signs of like how do you okay like what are signs of someone of a fake smile? Like what are signs of a fake smile? Because everyone is
Okay.
so like, "Hi, how nice to
Yeah.
meet you." La, 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 la,
Yeah.
la. And
Right.
like I personally feel like I can spot it like dead on. Um, but I want to know if there are very specific things that you can like point to
Yeah.
that my
Super
audience
easy.
can get.
Yes. Okay. So the easiest thing is that the smile has nothing to do with the mouth. Nothing at all, really. Nothing to do with what the lips are doing. When we experience joy, our cheeks pop up. They lose gravity. These are called our infraorbital triangles. And you can see you can see it, like it actually makes you happy
Yeah.
because it's contagious, right? So when I actually look at you and smile because I'm happy to see you, the that my cheeks actually make more of a ball and they rise. And depending on your baseline, the formation of the angle of your face, but you're still going to see those cheeks pop up. And what happens is you get these beautiful smile bags. So this skin right under my lower eyelid gets fat and puffs out. See that?
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's easy peasy. And my little one, Emma, who's now almost 21, she used to say, when the skin here gets fat, that means they're happy, mama. Because I trained them since they were itty bitty, since they were babies.
That's
And she was like so uninterested at whether or not there were crow's feet or whether or not like what was happening with the muscles in the informal triangle. And she was just like, if it's fat and you get this skin that sticks out and you can see on my face as I get older, it's going to be a little bit more puffy and it's going to hang a little bit. So you're looking for the change in that person's face, whatever their sort of normal neutral facial expression is. So depending on the day of my eye, if the skin underneath my eyelids is a little bit puffy, you'll see it'll bulge out to 2 or 3 times or 4 times its natural size. You'll see this huge change. So if you're trying to see if somebody's happy and you know what they generally look like, all you have to do is see, is the skin here fat? And it's it's the same exact area that we sometimes talk about. We get increased pigmentation depending on the natural pigment of our
mm.
skin. It might be brown or it might be purple. It might be, but it's a darker shade when we're not getting enough sleep. And that's exactly that area that we're looking for that to bulge.
So I would think that faking a smile is pretty simple, only because people know when they should be trying to look like they're happy or look like they're, smiling because they know people are watching them. They can kind of figure it out. What I
Yeah,
really
yeah,
I was gonna say, what I find interesting is when someone, like, let's say you get good news, this whole thing about like Schadenfreude, right? When people actually find like misery in
yeah,
someone's, um, and then when someone feels happiness in someone's misery, or like that's really what it is. But there's a lot of
yeah.
times when like you do something really great, and then people are like, "Oh my God, I'm so happy for you," right? Like that, like fakeness, like that, the
Yes,
phoniness. How can you
yes.
spot when someone's being phony and actually doesn't want the best for you, or when they're
Okay.
envious of you or jealous of you?
Yeah, so in Swedish we call it skadeglädje, which means injured cheerful or injured joy,
Okay, I like that
which is like
too.
basically somebody's getting hurt and you're happy about it. Um, and so that's a really good question. So the things that I will look for is whether or not the facial expression is particularly the micro expressions, knowing that the micro expressions leak people's true intentions and they can't hide them. And most people can't make the micro expressions on demand. My kids can do a little bit of them, but like, 20 years of practicing.
Right.
And
Wow.
so my th so first of all, if I'm saying something joyful, I should be, maybe nodding or I should be lifting my, informal triangles and showing that. That said, I can hear something and think that, like, "That's great. I've had such a hard day," or, "I have a migraine and I can't quite muster the joy." That's also okay. People sometimes have a hard time, like, reaching their joy, especially if they're struggling in their daily life or something, if their house just burned down. I mean, seriously, it's people are struggling today.
Right.
Um,
But we're
but
not
what you're
talking about that as
right.
much. Yeah.
So what you're gonna watch for so the smile is one piece of it. So do those words match that facial expression? But is somebody giving you a compliment while showing that disgust? That's a problem. If I say, "Jen, I heard that you got a promotion. I'm so happy for you, Jen." And you can feel it,
Oh,
right?
I
That
see
feels
that.
almost predatorily, predatory.
Yeah.
It feels really creepy. But if I say, "I hate broccoli," or "I hate bacon," then you're like, "Okay, well, that's a weird thing to hate, but all right,
Right, right,
fair."
right.
It
Exactly.
doesn't give you that same visceral response that you almost wanna sit back and create more distance from that person. So, we intuitively know it because that's our universal facial expressions are our universal nonverbal language, but we don't always have the words to put it on. We don't even consciously always know what we've seen or observed. Observed. Sorry, my
No. That I
language.
got what you were saying. Like, what is the biggest mistake that people make when they're trying to, if they want to, if they want to believe somebody? Like, are people? What's the biggest mistake that people are not looking for, or when they make when they're trying to read somebody?
I think they forget to dip their gaze. So, we're so trained to be respectful, and this varies
Yeah,
from culture to culture, but we're generally trained to look people in the eyes when when we speak to them, and we're missing all of this information that's happening around their face. Like anger, for example, is just this tightening, clenching of the lips. When almost like you see me, I'm
yeah.
clenching my hand as I'm doing that because anger clenches everything. I mean, it even clenches our neck and our shoulders as we prepare to fight in our fists. But like if you're trying to figure out if somebody's mad, the easiest way is just to look at their mouth and see if there's a change from their baseline.
So it's all in the lower lip if someone's mad.
So it's just this like you see I don't have particularly fleshy lips. My lips are fairly thin. So they almost disappear completely. The pigment is gone when I'm angry.
Right, but that's obvious, I think, right? Like if
That's
someone's
really
angry,
obvious. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But people still miss it if they're looking at their eyes,
Oh, right. So you're saying scan
right?
someone's total face,
Yes,
not just
and
look in their eyes.
don't hold your gaze on their mouth for more than 3 seconds at a time. Do you know why?
Why?
Because 'Cause they're gonna lean in to kiss you.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, not everybody, but
I was
I've
gonna
seen
say
people
everybody. I mean, or like guy versus girl. Well, that's actually a good
yes, I
point.
mean, it's the strangest or if you do want somebody to kiss you, like, look at their mouth.
Well, how do
But
you
I
know
have
if?
literally had clients in Asia when I was working in Asia trying to tilt their head, lean forward, and then catch themselves and be like, "What am I doing?" Because it's this sort of universal signal that I was signaling, and they stopped themselves. They weren't gonna do it. And there wasn't chemistry between us, but it was just almost like, when a baby lifts their face to kiss you? I mean, even if it's a strange baby, you almost like you catch yourself and you're like, I can't kiss this stranger's baby in the grocery store
Oh my
because
God,
I
that's so funny. So you're saying do not, if any, you should not look at someone's mouth for longer than 3 seconds because,
longer
like,
than 3 seconds at a time, but you can go up and down, up and down, up and down.
at a
Just like make sure
time.
you yes, you look away. Just it's almost like when somebody is making that sort of that clear eye contact and they're just staring you at like for a long time and it's longer than your specific culture holds eye contact. It almost feels either like they're asking for something. So it may be romance, it may be that they're angry, but something is going on with that length of eye contact that's deviating, that's sending out some really clear signal.
So then, like a natural instinct of somebody to somebody is if you are caught in this like 3 second or more gaze on on your lips, the natural instinct is to lean in and kiss. That is
Yeah,
really
usually like with a
funny.
head tilt first and then a lean. She don't wanna bump noses.
That is really funny, actually. Because my other question was like, how do you know if someone actually like in the dating world, right? Like how to read signs. Like, does someone really like you, or do they just want to sleep with you, or do they even care about you? Like how? Like I bet you, like I think a lot of times people are not catching on very subtle hints and they make excuses for people's bad behavior or lack of phoning and calling. But if someone just says, "Oh, baby, I love you," da, 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 they
Right, right?
believe it.
Okay, so there's 2 main pieces of this, and then I'll break them down. And
Okay.
the one piece is, like, whether or not somebody wants to sleep with you. 'Cause
Mm-hmm.
that's like that is one of the big questions in life, like, "Is this person attracted to me?" That's
Mm-hmm.
huge, and I sometimes think people focus too much on that, depending on what they want, right? But a lot of people want something real and want something deep and want something that's going to last. If you're looking for something real, deep, and, possibly permanent or long lasting, you're gonna want to see that there's emotional attachment. So let's look at we're gonna look at attraction and then we're gonna look at emotionally attached, or in other words, I care about you. So I'm attracted to you versus I care about you. So attracted is above, in, and under the eyes. Okay. So above is that it took me years to figure this out. I watched a lot of trashy TV. But this piece, because I didn't learn that in my coding, and that
Right.
was not taught to me in facial expression.
It wasn't. Okay.
No, but I knew, like, I knew there were these bedroom eyes, and, like, what is that? So I think it clicked mostly when I watched The OC. Did you ever watch that?
Really? Oh my God. No,
Ryan
I
Atwood, this
remember.
character, like, just spends, like, half of his time showing off his eyelids.
That is
And it
hilarious.
right? And it's like this almost like I call it when I'm teaching, I say it's like pulling down the shades to make
Yeah.
something romantic. You wanna, like, make the room a little more dark and romantic. So, they just kind of do this where they loosen their eyelids, and it's a very different look than somebody who's, like, really sleepy, because that's kind of this unfocused, my eyelids are drooping, and I'm just, like, checked out. This is often with, like, a little bit of a head tilt, showing some vulnerability there and softness, and then you're just, like, almost showing off, like, "Look how much eyelid I have."
And that's how you can tell if someone's
Yeah,
attracted to you.
and
Okay.
right, and so that's a big piece, and by the way, we're looking for that lowering, so we're looking again for the difference in the baseline, whether or not you have single folded eyelids or double folded eyelids. I have family members that are, Chinese. It doesn't matter, you're looking for the movement, okay? So that's the eyelids, that's the bedroom eyes. You're looking for a dilation of the pupils, so not that pupils are big, but that they become bigger during the conversation or interaction. So you're
Oh,
looking for
okay.
the change. So people can have bigger pupils depending on kind of their baseline, or they can have bigger pupils one day because they're on certain medication. Um, Drugs can make pupils either bigger or smaller. And so we're looking for the swelling of the pupils in the moment. So
Okay.
not the initial size that day. And we know that pupils expand and contract if the room is darker or lighter. If we're sitting outside and having a picnic and it's really sunny and there's some clouds, we know that when the sky becomes dark, our pupils are going to swell to allow in more light. And I talk about that as almost like throwing the door open and saying, like, come in, come in, come in.
Yeah, yeah,
'Cause you're
yeah.
opening that aperture and saying, like, "Come on in. Welcome."
But then what's the difference between someone who just wants to sleep with you versus someone who really cares about you and wants to have like a real
Okay.
relationship?
Right. So that difference I'll finish this one. So above the eyes, in the eyes, and under's those smile bags from the joy. We tend to get a little happier and more cheerful when
Mm.
we're around somebody that we're attracted to. So that's the attraction. And then the achy breaky heart, whether or not we empathize with somebody, whether or not we love them, whether or not we experience tenderness, that's right here on the chin. So if you tell me something hard or painful that you've experienced, I should be responding with a chin pucker if I care about you or I care about the
Uh-huh.
thing. And it's kind of that you can make yourself do it by just saying, "Oh," by looking like puppy
Mm-hmm.
videos or little baby videos, or if you look at pictures of your own children when they're really cute and chubby and little, and you'll automatically pucker that chin.
Mm-hmm.
And I usually include the caveat of, like, again, if somebody's having a hard time, they don't need to pucker their chin every time because you may be going on and on and on about venting about something. But if they never, when you talk about something physically, emotionally, or financially painful to you or somebody else close to you, they should be puckering their chin in empathy. And if they never do, that's an issue.
Wow, that's interesting. I like that. I think I saw that you said that that's for your chin is that spot. Now, but don't most people, I shouldn't say most people. Don't a lot of people know if you're telling them something that is vulnerable or telling them something that is meaningful, that the the reaction that you should give is looking like you care. So therefore they'll be like, "Oh, well, they can also you can also fake that."
Yeah, people don't know how to fake their micro expressions. At least I've never seen it,
Like if
right? And
someone
I've
said to me
lived
something terrible, like, "Oh, like I'm, my house was just burnt down." I'd
right,
be like, "Oh my
right,
God, that's horrible." Like,
right.
I mean, that doesn't
Doesn't mean
necessarily. Go ahead.
it doesn't mean you're in love with them, but it just means that you like it's sort of like the lowest bar is that they should at least care about you.
Right.
But as you're becoming more intimate and vulnerable in your conversations with somebody, they should be mirroring your facial expression, they should be participating, they should be leaning in, and they should be responding to you. And if they're not, that's an issue. I mean, I've seen it all the time where somebody has the right words, but when you talk about something that's really meaningful to you, they'll be like, "Oh, that's wonderful." And again, they're growling
Right,
at
right.
you.
They're growling.
Yeah. Right, if somebody's growling, that's not good. I mean, we know this stuff on some level, or at least a lot of us do.
We do intuitively. That's why I find this very interesting, right? Because I think that naturally a lot of us don't trust our own intuition, right? Like you feel it when someone like likes you, doesn't like you, if we should do something, not do something, if something's safe. Like what I
Yes.
find, you know what I mean? What I
Yeah,
think
no,
is interesting,
exactly.
you know, you talk about this and what I kind of glommed onto when I found you was about the kids piece, right? Like teaching kids what to look for and how to be
Yeah.
safe and like teaching this to children at a young age so like they don't get themselves into a situation that's dangerous, right? Like what to look for, like what do you teach kids what to look for um that is not safe? That's the first part. It's part A. The second part of that question is what can you do the same type of training for somebody online as you can in person? Can you still pick up on these micro expressions as easily online?
Yeah, okay, so first let's go back to the kids piece. I mean, that
Yeah.
was my obsession. So my career was as a strategic advisor. So I lived in Asia and then Europe and then and back in Asia again for 25 years. I guess 25, but part of that time I was at university, but my focus was working with managing directors and coaching executives, usually CEOs at the top level, working with boards. I never intended to use any of my micro expressions or to even go public about it. There were only 4 people in the world that outside of my family that knew that I was trained and proficient in micro expressions. My obsession was to simplify the field of science so that I could teach my children to recognize predatory behavior. And in my sort of weird and wacky brain, I was like, if this is something that babies know, there has to be some possibility of putting more simple words on it. There has to be a simplified vocabulary and a way of making it kind of shorthand so that we can talk about it without doing like a long numerical code of every different muscle group that's moving for the facial expression. So my obsession was that, and I started off by just narrating it the way you narrate, like this is a banana, this is a spoon, this is a truck. This is the no face, this is the ew face, this is the yuck face. And then I would have them make it just you know how when you have a baby and you do this, somebody tells you stick out your tongue and they'll stick out their tongue. So I would do that, but like on steroids. And I learned through trying over and over again that I would make my kids and myself really crabby if I did too much holding of the negative expressions. That I finally realized that my brain was reading that I was actually going through this trauma, that something was absolutely disgusting, or I was very angry, or I was terrified. Like that felt traumatizing to all of us.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
And likewise, if you just do that happy expression over and over again, you just kind of fake it till you make it. The whole point of the facial expression is that it sends a message to the amygdala to process the emotion. And when there's too much facial paralysis, we're not able to process the emotion. The interpretation of processing gets stopped. So
Oh,
high
wow.
advanced stages of Parkinson's or Moebius, where there's facial paralysis, that impedes our ability to fully empathize, to fully understand our own feelings and to fully understand other people's, because we need the facial movement for that. And so for the kids, I became obsessed with getting them to tell me when someone's facial expressions didn't match their words, or if just quite simply, tell me when anybody growls at you. I mean, that's just such a basic thing that every kid should know to report to whoever their caregiver is. This person is growling at me. And in my case, it was this man shows contempt and disgust when he talks to me. And that's a problem. A grown man should not be showing contempt and disgust to a little kid. That's something is very, very off. Now, the microexpression shows the feeling and not the thought process, but it does exactly what you just said. It shows us the red flags. We know something's off. And my kids had the advantage or maybe sometimes the disadvantage because they kind of saw everything going on. But the advantage in terms of keeping them safe, of having a joint vocabulary with their mother, that they could say, that man shows contempt and disgust. And I would be so fast. I like was so on it because I wasn't protected as a little kid. And so it was my full on obsession. I never intended to teach it to a wider audience. And part of what changed is I moved countries and I lost my professional network because I moved from Singapore to the US. And also what happened was, as my children got older and I was scared of AI getting everything and using it for nefarious purposes. I just was terrified of AI.
Really?
And so I didn't want what I knew and what I had worked for years with my kids to be used for not good purposes. Once AI got so, two things happened at the same time. My kids grew up and their friends, I was talking about microexpressions. I was doing some teaching at that time, and their friends would come over and say, will you just teach me one thing? Or my son's friends would come over and they're like, how do I know if she likes me? Annie, like, quick, when Matthias is in the bathroom, give me one thing I can look for.
Yeah. And by the way, I want to ask you, hey, hold on. This is fascinating. So staying on the kids, besides the growl, what you taught us about this nasolabial area, what to look for in
Yep.
disgust. Are there any other micro expressions that a kid or a parent listening can teach their kid quickly to look for? That's a
Okay.
good one.
So the disgust is just this, right? So
Yeah.
what I'll show you what a knowing smile is. And then I was taught when I learned facial expressions, when I learned the coding of facial expressions, I was taught that contempt is the only facial expression that is always only unilateral. So I was taught that a lip tuck was contempt on just one side of the face. Now, over the years, as I've poked and prodded, I've noticed that I do that lip tuck all the time when someone talks about, and you
Yeah.
and I were talking about one of your TED Talks, and I was saying, oh, I used to tell my daughter that, you have to try for something 10 times to be able to succeed once, or to be able to count on succeeding once. And you said something very similar that I loved. And when you said that, I noticed when I was watching this video, like, I tuck my one corner of my mouth into my cheek. It's not a smile, it's a tuck. And that just means, oh, I know all about this. And so that's the knowing smile. When you add the element of disgust from that facial expression, watch how this can change. That's just like, oh, I know about this. Now watch. See how
Interesting.
that feels so sinister? That's contempt. Contempt has to have that element of disgust. So disgust is the biggest one, but disgust with that knowing smile, it's kind of like, I know something that you don't know, and it's not good. It's just never good when there's that element of disgust. And then I think anger is really important for kids to understand. That's always tight lips. And that can be like tight lips when they're clenched. I mean, that's really important when you're little. And when I've worked with kids on the spectrum, kids with autism, and teaching them facial expressions, some of the students that I had were not adept at reading facial expressions of emotion, but they were my fastest learners that I've ever had in my entire career, because the individuals with autism that I've worked with specifically, I know autism is very wide ranging, and it's this whole kaleidoscope of things.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with the individuals I was working with, the pattern recognition skills that they had were phenomenal.
For
And
sure.
so, and
Yeah.
really quick study of it. And so I would show them what the facial expression would look like. And then we would go through the second step, would be like, what do you do if you notice someone is angry? And I worked with my own kids who are not on the spectrum, but have some other things going on. And, I mean, a lot of people do it. So,
Yeah. Of course.
but I would teach them this face with the lip funnel, the angry lip funnel. So that had the pieces of anger, concentration anger here, with the angry mouth when the lip is funneled out. And that is what I would call, so tight mouth that's funneled out. I call that the gonna get you mouth. So in my book and with my kids, I always talked about that as the run face, because that's the face that people are going to do when they're going to verbally or physically assault you. And so I that's a really important
One.
facial expression for kids. Just everybody should know what it looks like if somebody's going to attack you.
That's a
And that's
great,
not the only facial expression, but that they are likely to attack you if they're making that facial expression.
making that face. Guys, I got to tell you again, if you're listening to this podcast and not watching it, it's going to be hard to understand. I definitely recommend YouTubing watching this one. Because I think even just for the fact, if you're a parent and you want to teach your kids some simple ways to, if you want to teach your kids simple ways to look out for bad behavior, it's important to listen to this and watch it, I should say. How old is the kid? How old, like, what's the youngest age that you can teach this to?
So with my own kids, I started exactly, when they were infants, because I started narrating my
Mm,
facial expressions. Like, look, mama's happy, my cheeks are up, like I would talk about the smile, I would talk about fear, I would talk about, and I would get the babies can mirror the facial expression. Again, don't do it too long for the negative ones, please. The youngest student I've ever had, there was a risk of kidnapping, and she was 3 when we started.
3.
Yeah,
Wow.
and I probably wouldn't have worked with somebody that young, but I mean, wait, some people in particular live in a dangerous world. Her parents are well known, and their wealth is also well known. So,
Oh, right. So then you would have to teach these people, especially kids from very, very powerful families, wealthy families, right? What to look for. Because in general, everyone's going to want something from you, and they're going to have a lot of times, unfortunately, a lot of negative or their reasonings for wanting to be close to you are not what would be like the innocent, I
let's
would
see.
say.
Right,
Say, not
exactly. No,
innocent.
that's exactly it. So they brought me in. At that stage, I had stopped teaching, working with kids, and was mostly, traveling around doing keynotes and training with, financial institutions or big sales groups. And they attended a conference that a financial institute held for some of their wealthiest clients. And I had said on stage, I taught my kids, I used some examples, and I had said, I don't have the bandwidth to do individuals at this, anymore. And they pulled me aside. I didn't recognize who they were. I'm I'm mostly face blind, which is ironic. I remember every movement on someone's face, and I don't remember the color of their eyes or their facial
This
features.
is
My brain
unbelievable.
is
This is the cobbler has no shoes again. Like
I
this
know,
happens
I
all the
know. I like
time.
I barely recognize my own children. They find it infuriating.
Wow, that is
In the makeup look,
amazing.
you know? It's really terrible. I can tell by your voice instantly, like, I know, and I can tell by your facial expressions if we get into a conversation. I can remember, like, this boy that I was in love with, the facial expressions that he made when he was 14 years old. That's, like, 40 years ago.
Wow. But you can't, but you're
It's
blind otherwise. Is it
Yeah.
maybe a thing like reader glasses can help you with or no?
No, it's not that I can't see the face, it's that I cannot there's, like, a piece of my brain that can't remember it. It's
Oh,
worse.
wow. It's so
So it's like
funny.
I see you perfectly clearly, and I can remember, and I'm watching all these mo it's almost like I'm so interested in the micro. I remember even, when I was 14, I didn't know how to read facial expressions other than I had really good intuition. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, so anyway, long story short, the parents said, "We just need you to do this," and it wasn't until they explained their situation, and they were relentless. They were just like, "This is not you're gonna have to do this for us." And I just kind of looked at them like, "No, I don't."
Wow.
And
Yeah.
then when they explained, I thought, "Oh, like, here I am being all cocky and glib, and I do need to do this for them, and above all, I need to do it for their children." And you can see I'm self-soothing. I'm touching my skin and trying to calm myself down because even just thinking about it worries me. Um, so they
Yeah.
brought me in wanting to teach her to recognize predatory behavior and have a joint vocabulary again with the parents to be able to alert them and the caregivers, or, anybody else that was
Oh,
involved in the
wow.
caregiving of these children. The piece that I said two things. One, I'll only do it if I train you as well, because there's no point in this child having this vocabulary and this knowledge that is not shared in the family. And that was like that's just a deal breaker. Otherwise, I won't ever, and I never have worked with kids without working with the parents because they have to have that as a language that keeps developing once I'm gone.
Mm.
And the other piece was, yes, there were two kids, but they need to understand predatory behavior and be able to identify it. They also need to be able to tell when somebody really does love them. Because if you're living
Mm.
in this expectation that everybody wants a piece of you or your family or your dad or your mom because they're well known in the world, you do need to some people just don't care. Like some people are not interested in what your daddy does and are able to see past that. I mean, some people just aren't that motivated by money. I know a lot of people are, but some people could care less. But they might not give you 14 chances. They might just give you one or two if you're mean to them, or um, if you're suspicious of them. People who are kind and loving and caring don't like being accused of not being kind and loving and caring. So recognizing when somebody does love you, recognizing both negative intentions or impure intentions and really good loving intentions. Both of those pieces are really important for us humans.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point, right? To recognize when someone actually does have good intentions, right? It's not always negative. It's not
Yeah,
always
I mean,
bad.
there's so much love in the world. There's so many good people, and some of the really good people are not great at expressing it in words.
No, that's true. Yeah, I agree with you. And I think especially, but that's more of a situation like you were saying, when someone has a lot of people who are constantly wanting from you, and like they may probably lot of people, an influx of people who have bad intentions. Yeah, you'll find people,
Yes,
of
yes,
course,
it
who
it pulls them in, right?
it pulls you in.
Mhm.
Um, well then, when but you're saying something earlier though, like when they're like, how can you tell when your kid's friend, like, how can you tell if a girl likes me? How can you tell? Like you said, the bedroom drawn eyelids is like a show of like attraction.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that how you can tell if someone likes you, or
Yeah,
is
I
there
mean,
other
yes,
things too?
absolutely, but the biggest thing that I told this particular boy, and I said there was
Yeah.
another kid, one of my daughter, Emma, her friend came over, and I think I had just started on Instagram, and, I've only been on Instagram, I wanna say about a year and a half. Before then, I had, like, 1 post and 30 followers. So I started posting, and this guy that it was, a friend, a classmate of hers from high school, and he said, "Wait, I heard you could, like, read people," and like, "What? Like, can Emma do that?" And all this stuff. And she was going, don't tell him you're creating a monster." And I told him about the pupil dilation. If you're in a
Yeah.
conversation, that girl's really interested, her pupils will swell in the moment. In other words, they will expand, and that's kind of it's not a yes, you always have to ask for consent, but it
Yeah.
is that, it's interest. And she was so mad at me.
I can imagine. Did you tell? So basically, the pupils, the eyelids, um,
Yeah.
like what other things would you
Well,
tell?
so speaking of body language, the one thing that people do sometimes do on purpose, so there are a lot of people that have studied body language and are cognizant of this, but most people aren't. And it's that mirroring of body language. When we really feel aligned with somebody, whether it's romantic or not, I mean, even in a boardroom, I can like gaze around and see which board members are kind of aligned with each other because someone will lean forward and the person, that is feeling like we're kind of a team. We're
Hmm.
such pack mentality. The other person will lean forward and then somebody will lean back. I had, I think I wrote it in the book. I had this interaction with my high school boyfriend, and it was the first time we'd had a real conversation in over 30 years. And I was talking to him, and well, that's so funny that you just put three fingers up because I
Oh,
had
right, because you
three
were.
fingers. I had three fingers on my face, and I looked at him, and that's just like telepathy. Seriously, this is crazy.
That's
You
true. I
just
did the
did it
same
before I
thing.
reached for my face, and you did it with 3 too.
I did do that. I did. By the way, I
Yeah.
didn't put my hair on the side because you did it while you were saying that mirroring, and I was
No,
actually going to do it, and I stopped
I'm really
myself.
gonna do
Yeah.
no, but it's because we're aligned. It's because you're getting what I'm saying, and I'm getting what you're saying, and
Yeah. Yeah.
we're like, "Yeah, this is interesting," and this so I had 3 fingers on my face, and I looked at him, and I noticed he had 3 fingers on his face, and I went like this. He put down one finger and I was like, you mirror me down to my fingertips. And he was like, what does that mean? And I was like,
That's right. The mirroring for sure, though, is a good one.
yes.
Okay. So how do you spot? This is a couple ones I know that you talk about. I think because people are very curious. It's very hot right now, the topic of narcissism and
Yes.
narcissists. And people ask you all the time, like, how
Yeah.
do you spot a narcissist? How can you really tell by their
So
facial expression or micro
yeah,
expression?
the piece that really is absent for me is that pucker of the chin. The narcissist that I know, and I'm not an expert per se in narcissism. I talk about it constantly, and partly because my absolute best friend, what my middle child is named after her, is a clinical psychologist. We talk every single day.
I love
We
that.
and we discuss all of our work and all of these things, and we talk about narcissism all the time because it comes up in her work and in my work. The piece that I look for with the facial expressions is that lack of puckering. The empathy is absent. The genuine deep care. The words are the right words. The facial expressions, there's all these red flags with the facial expressions. They don't match. There's a growling with when something good happens to the other person because the narcissist is looking for supply, right? They're looking to take, usually, that my understanding at least, and in my life experience, is that they tend to go after fairly powerful, confident people a lot of the time because that's much more interesting to take down somebody. It's much more of a challenge to
Hmm.
take down somebody powerful than it is to take somebody weak and sort of socially isolate and control them. That's not always the case, but I found that in my life with the narcissists that I tend to have attracted in my past. Um, and then there's this piece of moving away from the facial expression. There's this initial stage of love bombing where it's like too good to be true, and they're parroting and mirroring everything back to you, both in with the body language, but they're so into it. And I actually believe that the narcissists that I've been involved with romantically, which, by the way, just to be clear, not my ex-husband, um, have have experienced some of that love bombing phase together with me, especially when I was in my early 20s, that there was a moment of really feeling that infatuation. I don't think it's, just that they're made of stone. I think that there's sometimes moments of that really deep connection. And I always look for the intermittent reinforcement, right? That there's this amazing period where everything's almost like heightened and magical, and then you're forever trying to get back to those moments, but the behavior gets more and more abusive over time. Narcissists don't like it when you are thriving, whether that's financially, whether that's other men are attracted to you if it's a male narcissist. There's lots of female narcissists as well, but it's all like head games, and it all has to do with control.
You know what's interesting? You just said something that I've spoken to tons of clinical psychologists and experts, narcissism experts. One thing that's interesting that you said, and I tend to agree, but most people don't say that, is narcissistic men who are truly narcissists
Yep.
will rather be with a very strong girl
Yeah.
because it's more of a challenge to like
Well,
knock them down than a weaker, more insecure, docile, because those
yep.
girls are easier targets for them.
Right. It's
So if
already
you're
almost a done
competitive,
deal.
well, yeah,
Right.
I
It's
think if
almost a
you're,
done deal. Like the whole like scenario, the whole game is already completed
it's easy.
if the person is too weak and submissive.
Yeah, I think if you're like an alpha who's super
Yeah.
competitive and like just want to have like see if like the challenge piece of it, I guess you can have a narcissist though, and I know plenty of narcissists, believe me, who are so insecure
You live
that
in
they just
LA.
won't even bother. Exactly. I live in like the Mecca,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they're so insecure they wouldn't last with a strong girl. Like they don't have
Right.
they don't have the stamina, so then they'll
Correct.
go for the weaker girl. The
Right.
ones
And
who have
so,
the stamina and have actually, because I don't think
oh,
necessarily like every narcissist has to be a total like
yeah.
outwardly insecure person,
Right.
right? Some of them actually they try to believe that they're actually
Well,
Just
and
like,
some of them are like these pillars of community outwardly and in their
yeah.
familial relationships and their romantic relationships and with their children are awful. And like I said, I am not a clinical psychologist. I am I am an expert in facial expressions. That I know upside down in the dark. I 24/7, multiple decades. That's my full-on obsession. I am very, very educated. I have a master's degree in anthropology. Yes, I've lived in 9 countries, as I said. I've been all over the world. I've tested this, and people will say, well, I had somebody the other day that I was talking to, and they said, well, not in Asia. And I was like, honey, I've lived in 3 different countries in Asia for almost 12 years. Like
Wow.
I have practices in Singapore. I was in Singapore for a little over 9 years. And, it's this beautiful melting pot of people from all over the world. I mean, that is where I trained my children. So it is a universal thing. I do think that my experience with narcissists, I consider myself a fairly strong woman. I was abused as a child, so I do fight the instinct to hide still in my life, to make myself small and to blend in with the woodwork and to be a people pleaser.
Mm,
That said, as I've grown older and older, like I've had to learn to fight and I've had to learn to create a life that was very, very different from the life that I was born into.
that's why your word at 50 was bold.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
I
was.
like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I was
Uh,
given a necklace in silver that said bold for
I
my
love that.
50th from my best friend. And I used to hide it under my clothes because I wasn't that bold.
Oh, not yet. You were working up to showing it to
I
the
was
world.
working
You
on
were
it.
wearing it though.
Getting ready to publish my book. And I was I knew I had to go out on social media. I was absolutely terrified of taking up space in the world just because I know as a woman, you take up any kind of space and you become a target. I mean, I don't answer telephone calls from anybody that's not on my contact list. I get crazy, like really terrible emails sometimes. I get some lovely ones too. My email address is no longer public and I mean, you know what it's like.
Totally. I agree with you.
Yeah.
Let me ask you 2 more questions and then I'll let you go because I know we had so much technical issues. My phone's blowing
Oh,
up.
it's
You're
okay.
probably,
I can do
uh,
this all day.
I know. And I love you got a very nice spirit about you, Annie. You
Thank
really
you.
do. You're welcome. How could you spot a liar in a minute? Is there like just like some like telltale signs that someone can just tell right away?
Right. So, lie detection, the people that I love listening to about lie detection, the people that Joe Navarro, I love him. FBI agent.
Mm,
He just wrote a book about body. He's written a couple books, but you want to get your information from people who have been in life or death scenarios. If you're looking
mm-hmm.
for lie detection, I want somebody who's been in the military or somebody that's been where it's really been high stakes, and not just somebody who says like I'm an expert on body language because I just everybody's always told me I'm good at it. Like I want somebody who's really
Right.
been trained. Give me a hostage negotiator, give me boss,
Yes.
like, give me somebody who's been through it,
I
and I will
totally
believe it.
agree. I like this
So
guy I've had on the pod, just not to interrupt you.
yeah, no, tell me.
Uh, Joe Navarro, I just wrote him down. I'm gonna reach out to him
Yeah,
unless you know
he's
him.
I've never met him, and
Oh, okay.
everywhere I go to speak, somebody's like, "We had Joe Navarro on us last year."
I'm gonna look into him. I love this
Yeah,
guy. He wrote the book. Why am I blanking? He's like a hostage negotiator. He's very well
Chris
known.
Voss?
Chris Voss. Yeah, I like him.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah,
I do a lot of places where he's yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And in fact, there was one
Uh,
guy that I don't think the podcast was ever published, and he said in the pre-interview, he's like, "I don't like Chris. I didn't like him. I interviewed him, and I didn't like him." And I was like, "Oh, shit, you're not gonna like me either." And he didn't, and they never published the
are you
podcast.
serious? That's hilarious.
He did
I
not like somebody getting insight into, like, what was going on, and I was like, "Dude, I'm not analyzing you. We're just having a conversation."
I know that's someone that's very interesting actually.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, it
that's
was
a
really interesting.
very interesting person that's ready. That's a sure sign. But
Yes.
right
Yes. So we
there.
talk about that sometime offline because I'll tell you the whole story. It was really, really interesting. And I just like, I sat there in that chair and I was like, this is not going to ever go up see the light of day because
Oh,
you've got some
wow.
stuff that you are hiding, sir, and it's none of my business. And like, can we please get back to talking about my book?
Yeah,
It was
exactly.
launching at the time,
Let's get
right?
back to me. Exactly.
Back to me, back to
Yeah,
myself.
exactly. I
So
love it.
so the piece that is really interesting because people who are experts in lie detection will tell you they look for three things. That the general idea is like three hot spots. You're looking for three clues because lie detection is really, really hard, as it turns out. So there are all sorts of, if somebody's using a qualifier, the one I like, the guy who told me he was a mostly good guy wanted to date me.
Mostly
Like,
good guy.
ooh,
Yeah.
turned out, yeah, he was married. I was
Oh,
like, that was
not
like
so
a
great.
red flag.
Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I was like, oh, hell no.
Yeah.
But that was a red flag. And when you know those red flags so clearly, it's really, you don't want to ignore them, but it's nice to like not do the 6 months and then find out you're being betrayed.
Yeah.
Right. So I think you had a guest. I can't remember what her name was. I listened to her the other day. You had such a good conversation. It was such great chemistry. She wrote cues.
Oh, you mean Vanessa Van Edwards? She wrote Social
Maybe.
Cues. She's a body language person.
Yes, yes, yes. She's
Yes.
actually I had not read her work, but I'm going to now because I thought that interview was excellent.
Thank you.
But
She's
she
very
talked about
good.
like going up, like raising your voice as a question. That's one of the things I look for. Nodding, and this is not universal, but it is practically universal in North America, US, Canada, Mexico. This means yes, this means no. Western Europe, not the same in Asia and places in Asia or India, Sri Lanka. They do a bunch of different head movements, but when Hillary Clinton says, "I knew my husband was a good man," and she should be doing this, and instead she goes, "And my husband's a good man." I
She
was like,
did. She
oh.
nodded the other way.
Yeah, in one of her episodes of Grit that I believe is on Apple TV. Um, and I thought about using it as like a clip for my microsources. I thought I'm going to get in so much trouble, but though she was allowing one of the women that she interviewed to actually ask her why she stayed with Bill, and she said, "Because I knew my husband was a good man." That's not good.
Wow.
Yeah. So I look for that, like really clear disconnect. But with the facial expressions, the thing that I love, and I think the reason that I'm so obsessed with this science, and by the way, I've worked with clients like the Museum of Science in Boston. This is scientific stuff. I teach it in a very pragmatic way. I'm not sure all my the people in my field that are really good at the laboratory research would agree. My tendency to like advance my ability and my children's tendency is to go out and kind of provoke people and see if we can get the same facial expression for the complex facial expressions over and over and over again in like similar situations. Do we get the same response? Like, is that what the facial expression of hurt looks like? Or is this what the knowing smile looks like? How do we play? How do we test? So I'm an anthropologist. All my stuff is like field work where I'm like digging in the dirt myself. But I look for that facial expression not matching the words, like I said. Is somebody saying, "Nice to meet you," and they're showing disgust? Or, "I really want to do this," and they're showing disgust. Now, really important to remember that I can see exactly what you're feeling. I know the feeling for sure with the facial movement in microexpressions. I do not know what somebody's thinking. So if you ask me to come back on your podcast next week and I do that, it may just be like next week I'm traveling. I'm with a client all next week. That's going to be hard for me. Doesn't mean I don't want to come back. But if every time you mention ever doing anything with me, it's the cue to repeat the experiment. Does somebody do that multiple times? Is every time we talk about, Annie and Jen doing something, I kind of go like this, then that's an issue that you're going to want to find out. But again, it only shows the feeling. But if someone's saying like really positive words and showing negative facial expressions, that's a problem. That's a red flag.
I think that's interesting too, because it's not just a one-off sometimes. There has to be consistency. And
Yes.
like if you're in a sales situation, right?
Yes.
Right? Like this is a big one for people who are in like business. And how can you tell if someone is responsive to what you're trying to do and when to
Yeah.
back off and when to kind of keep on going?
So the biggest, I do a lot of training for people in investment situations. I talked about managing consulting, but my first job was 20 months as an analyst in private equity. I was
Okay.
terrible at it. I was terrible at it, but I do a lot of training for mergers and acquisitions, and I do a lot of training these days for legal teams and people that are in just any kind of really high stakes negotiation, and I teach them to figure out like which are the parts of their pitch that are really high stakes. Like when you're presenting a price for something, when you're doing valuation and you're discussing that, you're going to want to say like, does the person do this? That's fear. That's a problem. Do they clench their lips in anger? That's also a problem. Do they raise their infraorbital triangles in pleasure? That's meaning that are they nodding a lot and their cheeks are popping up? That means they like it. Do their pupils start to swell? That means they like it. And again, when you start the meeting, you're going to gauge how big this is really high stakes. You're looking at the person across the table and you're going to tell yourself, I have to use words in my brain. I have to literally say, okay, their pupils are medium sized. So that if I'm looking away, because I'm not staring at them, especially if it's a team the entire time, I need to remember what size the pupils were at the beginning. So if I look away and then look back and the pupils are doubled in size, my brain will register that. If that's something that's a little bit fiddly, it takes a lot of effort. It's like going to the gym. You have to learn the movement and the
Yeah.
muscle movement. But that piece, if I see pupil dilation, I'm done. I'm not going to keep selling. I'm done with the selling. Now we just talk about whatever they want to talk about. Because if you've ever, you've done sales, right? You know that there's a risk of overselling and losing them. So you
That's a good
don't want to
point.
go past that point. Yeah.
So what I picked up from this podcast were there's some very universal signs that can play in lots of areas. The dilation of the pupils, the way somebody's mouth is, the way their mouth is up or down.
Yep.
That growl was a big one. And the
Yes.
puffy cheeks to tell someone's like happy, likes you, smiling. Like
Yep.
there's a few very like core movements that I think
Yes.
that are just can play into lots of different scenarios, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And my goal, I do coaching in my life. I work with mostly with CEOs and boards and managing directors, and teach them how to navigate really difficult relationships. And then I do a lot of micro expressions training and corporate training. But on the side, I feel like it's extremely important to get this knowledge out into the world. And that's why I do the social media. And I have online courses that are expensive and kind of corporate. But the thing that I'm going to launch now, hopefully within about 4 weeks, is a subscription service so people can pay, $8 or so a month and get these in bite-sized chunks, because that was about the best synopsis I've ever heard.
Yeah, right.
Where you're going like, and I learned this, and I learned this, and I learned this, and I learned this. Most people's brains can't absorb as much as you did that quickly.
Thank you.
So most
thank
people
you.
just need it really broken down and like piece by piece, and then you just practice repetition, and see it on a lot of different faces. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh my God, I just saw it clear as day. And once it clicks in your brain, you're done. For the rest of your life, you will see this everywhere, and you'll not understand why you didn't see it before.
Well, it's fun. Thank you for saying that. I find that life it's all about patterns, right? Like picking up on,
Yes.
maybe I'm also autistic. Maybe I'm on the spectrum. Like you were saying, the people that you worked with who had autism, they picked up on patterns quite
So fast.
quickly. And,
So fast.
so
Fun.
and so I mean, maybe what I think I might be good at or not, or what I think that we thrive in is that pattern recognition of, in general, like I try, what I'm good at, and what I'm bad at, I'm like just terrible at.
Yeah, me
And
too. Yeah.
right, like most
Yeah,
people.
I'm
But
dyslexic. I can't remember faces,
I
and
can't
yet I
remember.
work with faces.
I can't remember. By the way, me too. I can't remember anything. I can't do administrative work. I'm terrible at communication. But observe like picking up on social cues and observations and all these things. Like I feel like a lot of this, it's about just like they're transferable skills. Like what's going to
Yeah.
be bad in this area is also going to be bad in that area. So
Yeah.
of all the thousands of micro expressions, it really comes down to like a top 20 or top 10 that are the
Yeah.
most important foundational pieces.
Yes, I mean, you can combine and combine and combine, but like if you, my obsession with the kids was trying to figure out how to teach this in a simplified way. So the obsession was, and I don't believe anybody had ever done it before. If they have, I have not seen it, was to identify one piece of the face that was unique to only that feeling, that emotion, that expression. So, for example, disgust is always going to have a movement right here. Anger is always going to have tight lips. Now, anger also has a furrowing of the brows, but the problem is we furrow a brow in concentration as well.
Yeah.
So maybe just problem solving. So that piece and the idea that I think my brain is similar to yours in that you want not the shortcut, because it's not that you're trying to skip the hard work or the
No.
challenging pieces, but you're like, give me what I want to focus on and let
And
me
what's
start there.
tangible, this is what it is also,
Yeah.
like, give me the tangible pieces
Mhm.
that I can implement that can be the most helpful. I'm never going to be an expert or a specialist like you, and I'm not trained. I'm not going to be memorizing all these things, but there's in whatever anybody does, if you can top line two or three great takeaways for the average person to make their life, circumstances, whatever, just a smidgen better, 10%
Right.
better.
Right.
That's what I'm looking for. And I think you gave it to us. So
Thank you.
you're welcome. Okay, the book is called Diary of a Human Lie Detector. Boom, boom, boom. And her coaching or the subscription service, all that. When is that coming out, Annie? You said?
Probably about we're aiming to have it out in about 4 weeks. But yeah, people
Cool.
can check my Instagram or my website, anniesarnblad.com, and it will be
Perfect.
advertised.
There you go,
Yeah.
guys. Check her out. She's great. Thank you again, Annie, for everything. I appreciate you being on the show.
Oh, my pleasure, Jen. It was awesome.
Thank you.